Hello and welcome back, and today we are finally reviewing the Whitechapel album Kin. Now, for those of you that don't know Whitechapel, they were founded in 2006 by members Phil Bozeman and Ben Savage, and the band currently to this day has about 7 albums under their belt. So going through, we have the Somatic Defilement from 2007, This is Exile from 2008, A New Era of Corruption from 2010, their self-titled album in 2012, Our Endless War in 2014, Mark of the Blade from 2016, The Valley, which dropped in 2019, and then Kin, 2021. And not to mention, they also had an EP called the Recorrupted EP back in 2011 as well. Now, we're talking about their newest album here, Kin, which is supposedly themed around the relationship between a younger version of Phil Bozeman, the vocalist, and this alternate evil version of himself, which is supposed to be a manifestation of all of his dark and negative thoughts that he was having following the story of the Valley. Because this is kind of like a sequel to that album where it's exploring his personal issues and like the stuff that happened in his family to his stepdad, his mum, his real life, like his real dad, and like the depression and loneliness and stuff like this that he felt as a young kid, seeing them die so quickly and stuff like that. So, let's see what we have here. Right, track 1. I Will Find You, 4 minutes 55 seconds. So this one starts kind of slowly before picking up into verse 1, and it talks about the valley, where the first album was set, and they're kind of leaving it on fire, you know, like burning the past sort of symbolic things, and this serves as the opening track where it sees the dark Phil hunting young Phil, if that makes sense. And the aim of him hunting him is to kind of try and bring him back to that dark place, and it's encapsulated very well in the entire album. And especially in this song with lines like, "A beast will always smell the blood of a coward, and a narrow-minded fool will always follow down the narrowest path." And the other line that I feel kind of is very much along the lines of this as well is, "Still you are weak, you are just a boy with his mother's eyes that carries the weight of his father's heart." Which, you know, after his dad dying via a heart attack in the family, well, he collapsed in the family house and then was later moved to hospital where he died. And, you know, his mum suspected murder, overdose sort of thing. You know, it's kind of a lot. And I suppose that could be a way that he kind of sees himself, like, you know, he sees a bit of both of his parents in him still, and he's like trying to fight to keep that alive. But moving on, we have track number 2, Lost Boy, which I believe was one of the first singles off of this album. And this one runs for just under 4 minutes. I think it's like 3 minutes 58 seconds. And this one carries on the hunt, and it finds Dark Phil finally catching up to the younger Phil, who is kind of living elsewhere now. I think it's supposed to be with like his grandparents, and he's still just kind of stalking him, and kind of this dark entity just lurking in the shadows, waiting, watching him. And lines like, "Lost boy, we are one the same, no matter how much you resist me. I'm with you, we're in this together, you will be mine forever." And carrying that on into the outro where there's a solo followed by the lines of, "We are connected, we are the orphan sons, I am the voice that guides you, you are mine forever." It kind of shows, you know, that this innocent young version of Phil is still the Phil having these dark thoughts and struggling with these problems as well as trying to retain his innocence. So yeah, it's definitely very interesting so far. Moving on in the narrative, we have track 3, which is a Bloodsoaked Symphony, which again was one of the singles of the album, and I have reviewed it previously, but I will go back and review it in context of the full album. So, this song is about 4 minutes, 28 seconds, and like I said, as I have said, I've reviewed this track as a single. But after listening to it many more times, you know, before the release, after the release, in context to the album, in conjunction with the rest of the tracks and stuff like this, I still feel like this stands out to me as one of the great tracks on the album. You know, and if you consider the track, again, is still being sung by this dark Phil, it's interesting how innocent some of the lines come across, where it's stuff like, Mother, I pray that your voice sings me to sleep to save my sanity from this blood-soaked symphony. Father, I pray that your hand is warm again. My pain will never end until you both come back to me. Which is a very stark contrast to the bridge, where he says, I bring the gift of resurrection. The power returns from which it came. Mother, Father, come back to me. And he's kind of doing this, I guess it's like a spell or sacrifice or ritual to kind of resurrect his parents from the dead, sort of thing, to kind of ease his own suffering in a way. Which like I say, it contrasts itself, and it is quite a good part of the narrative, personally. So moving on, we have track number 4, which is Anticure, 5 minutes 35. So going into it, I think this was maybe like the third, it could have been the third and final, actually, single off of this. And I remember a lot of people hated this track, because it's a slightly softer sound to it. It's more of a clean sung. It's Phil showing off his, you know, softer side, his clean singing, but there is still gutturals in there. And what I've learned going through this album is that a lot of the times the clean vocals represent the story from the side of younger Phil, whereas the harsh vocals represent the story from the side of this dark entity Phil. So when you're hearing a song like Anticure and it's sung predominantly in clean singing, this is a song predominantly being told through young child Phil's eyes, in a way. You know, there's, but yeah, like I said, it garnered a lot of heat on release, and personally, I think it may have been too early to judge, and once you take into context what I've just said, and the fact that it is part of a narrative, and that the clean singing is also part of that narrative as well, it kind of all works very well together. And I'm not going to lie, Phil Bozeman has a nice singing voice, so if you're one of those, you know, like, people that are like, I don't like clean singing in my deathcore, you know, if it's done well, which Phil Bozeman does do it well, he doesn't do it in every track like some bands, he does it when it's necessary. And I feel like in this album, and in The Valley where they introduced it, the clean singing is necessary to aid the story. But on top of that as well, we do have a great solo in this song, and like I said, it just fits the album. It's very well done. It's just a great song. And if you don't like it, there are going to be other tracks on this album very similar to Anticure that you probably won't enjoy either. But for someone like me who enjoyed Anticure, you will enjoy the rest of these other softer songs. So, moving on, we have track number 5, The Ones That Made Us, 4 minutes 10. Normally, I wouldn't take a break here to do this, but I am going to give a pre-warning, as this song and the lyrics and themes of it do pertain to suicide and drug overdoses. So if you are of a nature where you don't like those topics, it may be best for you to skip ahead to track number 6, but I just wanted to put that warning in there just to be safe. So, now that that's out the way, this song is from Phil's evil side, where it's himself confronting young Phil, trying to convince him into committing suicide via an opiate overdose so that he can be reunited with his parents, which is quite a heavy topic. Lines like, "A war won't save us, we can unite with the ones that made us, there isn't a reason to stay locked down in a wretched realm where we can kill ourselves and return to the ones that made us." Or even in the verse, there are two subsequent, verse 2, subsequently, the bridge as well reads, "Let the opium take us away to our home, let the opium burn." And then the bridge is, "What have you done to me? An overwhelming sense I can't control. The light is fading in the distance and I'm terrified of what's ahead. My body is weightless, I'm nauseated. It will pass in time and I can see through logical eyes this will be a ritual suicide." It's all rather deep. It's all, topics that are very close to Phil. He's dealt with suicidal thoughts. He's seen, drug overdose and what that sort of stuff can do to you. And, when you hear it, it's kind of like, damn. But I do think it's a very interesting part of the narrative of Kin, and I would definitely say that I respect Phil Bozeman for, just laying himself bare and laying his problems out there and using it as a way of, I guess it's probably kind of like a therapy for him, So if you ever end up seeing this Phil Bozeman, I just want to say mad respect to you, man. Not everyone could pour their heart out like that and make it seem so fucking cool. Moving on, we have track number 6, which is History is Silent, which is 4 minutes and 55 seconds. So this is a slightly more somber track to start with, and the track has a very slow, soft, shifting start, which links to his mother's passing on December the 30th, when he was 15, which is shown in the lines, "And I dread December, I crave those summer days when we were young, but summer came with more of the same old song that cuts so deep, it's sad to say I crave my grave." And being the key part of that is the whole "I dread December," because like I said, if your mum passed away December 30th, sometimes the holidays are the hardest part of the year for people in general, but having that extra sadness, that extra black cloud hanging over that day and that month, it's got to be tough, I can't imagine that. Moving on, we have track number 7, which is To the Wolves, which is 3 minutes and 55 seconds long. So with this one, we're going back to the heavier sound here again, and we have lines like, "Wipe your tears, my dear, sweet elder. Compulsion is inherited. Compassion can mend a broken man. But I am beyond the point of your love, of the love you send. I have an urge to taste blood on my tongue, a passion to watch the whole world burn. The innocent child you knew is dead. Yes, he is dead." And this just crushes the track, and that's just in the first verse alone. But as a whole, the track fits very well where it's positioned in the story, and it is just a great way to keep that story and the album chugging along. And I'm enjoying the way that they're, just sprinkling the cleans in here and there. It's not in your face, it's not taking over the album, it's very tastefully done. Moving on to track number 8 now, we have the track Orphan, which is 4 minutes 41 seconds. So with this, we go back to the soft sounds with a very rock vibe, but it's also a deep emotional track as well, and I think these occasional soft songs aid the flow of the story very well, and the aspects again of which Phil's vocals are not being too soft is perfectly done in my opinion. And we also have to remember that it does seem like these softer songs are again from the young version of Phil's point of view and his perspective and his thoughts and, you know, his side of the story almost. So we are now moving on to the final 3 tracks, where we have track number 9, Without You, which is 1 minute exactly. This is an instrumental track that just breaks up the flow of things in the latter portion of the album, which then flows seamlessly into track number 10, Without Us, which is 4 minutes and 37 seconds. This one starts a little softer before kind of feeding into that Without You softer instrumental, almost like that was an prelude or an intro to this track, before the heavy chorus kicks into gear and it has a perfect ebb and flow, and it just feeds off of each other, and it feeds off of the rest of the story of the album, and the way that everything is just kind of keeping this gripping emotional roller coaster ride going throughout the entire thing, you know. And like I say, it just goes from soft to heavy to soft to heavy so well. Like, the band and Phil feed off of each other so perfectly, and it really just sets up the final track of this album, which is track number 11, the title track, Kin, and it's 5 minutes 37 seconds. So when I was doing this album, there was an interpretation of what this song was about on Genius, and I read that after listening to it, and I think it sums it up very well. Where it seems to be, it starts off as from younger Phil Bozeman's perspective, where he's kind of like having a discussion with darker version of Phil, and he's, you know, saying he understands his point of view, and he understands his anger and emotion, and understands him wanting them all to go back to being a family and stuff like this. But at the same time, he's also telling and kind of pleading with darker Phil to let their traumatic past go and just let themselves grow up and become a better man for that. And, you know, it's almost like this entire album serves as saying, my past doesn't have to define me, you know? And I really enjoyed the dynamic and like the conversational style of this, where it's like we have the clean choruses of young Phil saying, you know, I understand your point of view, we don't need to be like this though. And then you have the darker version of Phil retaliating and retorting in the like heavier parts of the song, and then it kind of feeds off of that again and keeps going. And it is just a great dynamic, and it seems to me that it's a perfect album, you know. If you don't like the clean vocals, like I said, you won't like some of these verses, some of these tracks, but for the love of God, just fucking give it a go. Like, and what I will say is, if you have the time, if you listen to The Valley first and then move straight into Kin, and listen to the story all in one and just read along to the song with it, it's a fucking experience, and it is a great job from the guys at Whitechapel. I've loved everything they do, but yeah, The Valley and Kin have definitely been a special set of albums. So my final thoughts. This album serves as the perfect sequel to The Valley, honestly. I don't think you could have done it better. The dynamic of the evil and young Phil is a very cool theme and personality for the album. And once again, it is all killer and hardly any filler. I do think, you know, some people would probably argue that the instrumental track wasn't needed and could have been considered filler, and that the, you know, softer side of things probably didn't need to be added in, but I would retort they did for this, especially the clean singing because like I said, it adds that personality that is young Phil talking, whereas the heavier stuff is dark Phil talking. I think the 1 minute short instrumental served as a good prelude to the final wrapping up of the tracks, and you know, like getting ready to go into like that closing segment, and it just kind of braced everyone for the calm and the serene end where the two sides of Phil kind of, you know, shake hands, I guess, like, and kind of understand each other finally. It's a very interesting one. For me, I would personally give this at least a 9.5 out of 10. And, you know, overall, the creativity, the storytelling, the great musicianship, the album artwork actually feeds into the story as well because of the two faces. One represents bad Phil, one represents good Phil. It's all just so great. The only reason I'm not giving it a 10 is just there's a little bit of me that feels like maybe we could have stretched this out for a couple extra songs where we could have had a bit more depth into the final like conversational side. Maybe we could have had, instead of Kin being one song, we could have had it, or one short song, we could have had it be maybe like, instead of 5 minutes, be 10 minutes, and we could have had like a full-blown, like, you know, Phil clean singing for the first couple of minutes, giving his perspective, then a couple minutes for darker Phil to give his perspective, and so on and so forth, until they finally comes to that culmination where they understand each other, they realize they're not going to get anything out of the way that they've been going on and stuff like that. But yeah, I fucking loved this album, and it was really hard to pick 4 top songs. But with that being said, I finally ended up managing to pick 4. So, for those of you that aren't sure if this is your cup of tea, the ones that I would recommend checking out to get the best overall understanding of the album as a whole would be opening track, I Will Find You. Because just like The Valley, the opening track on this album is a fucking standout track. The Valley's opening track was, I believe, When a Demon Defiles a Witch, which was a standout track for me on that one, and they managed to replicate the exact same feeling I had with that track on this one. Second is Bloodsoaked Symphony, just because of how heavy and emotional it is, like, and the narrative hidden within it, and the story in the music video as well. It's just a very great track. Number 3, we have Kin, the closing track, because of the fact of what I said in it is like just so well done, and the conversational piece is there to add to it as well. And lastly but not leastly, it is The Ones That Made Us, which is, again, like I said, it is a heavy track, it is a deep track, it is an emotional, turmoil-filled track, but it showcases Phil's writing style with great prowess, and I so definitely think it is one of their songs that could stand the test of time. But with that being said, this is Kin, the album review, done and dusted. My next video will probably be a little something different. There's been 2 EPs dropped recently, where we had Spirit Box drop a 3-song EP, and Mirelore, which is the ex-Enterprise Earth vocalist's side project, or only project now, they dropped a 4-song EP, so I might do a video where I review both of those as a whole. But with that being said, this has been Kin. This has been an interesting ride, and I thank you if you managed to stick around. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share it to anyone that you know that likes Whitechapel, and I will see you in the next video. Stay safe out there.